pound of ground beef. $6, $2 off, so we're going to go with that one. We'll see what we can do for our meal on a budget, because unfortunately, meat is extremely expensive. So peas are $2.49 a can. I'm going to go and check and see what they cost in the frozen section. $2.19 if we go with the store brand. So we could go with a small bag of the frozen veg. It is $5, but we have extra left. But I'm just going to go stick with the can. So this week's meal on a budget, we are making actually 2 different dishes using the same set of ingredients. So you could do 1 full recipe of the shepherd's pie or 1 full recipe of the meatloaf with mashed potatoes. But I just wanted to show you how to use the same ingredients for 2 separate recipes. This was $14.68, which isn't bad. It would feed 4 people, either the meatloaf or the shepherd's pie. So I'm going to be making 2 portions of meatloaf, 2 portions of shepherd's pie. So join along and we will see how this turns out. I'm just going to wash my hands. Move this out of the way. I'm going to open this package of ground beef. This package I ended up getting on sale because it actually does expire today. So because it expires so soon, it was on for $2 off. So instead of spending just over $6 for it, I spent $4, which is always a nice little bonus. So I'm going to put my gloves on for when I'm handling meat. I would typically use a larger bowl because I'd be doing the entire package of ground beef. But because I'm going to be making a cottage pie and a meatloaf, I'm going to roughly put it in half and put the ground beef in there. I'm going to break 1 egg. You don't have to use egg in your meatloaf if you choose not to. I just like it. I have eggs in my house. If you don't have eggs, you don't need to use it. And I probably shouldn't have used my gloves first because I do need to grab a second pair of gloves, because I will need to put some pepper, some salt, and whatever seasonings you like to put in it. I like this Kinder's blend. It's just salt, pepper, and garlic. I know I've already put salt and pepper in there, but I'll put that in. And the other thing for meatloaf is typically some plain breadcrumbs. Because I am going to put my gloves on and not want to touch my pan again, or my breadcrumbs again, I will put some extra in a side dish so that if I need to use it, I can use it. More gloves because I don't want to get meatloaf in my hand or my ring. Again, probably could have used a bigger bowl. I'm going to take a handful of those onions and put them in my meatloaf. Okay, and that egg has made it a little goopy. Some more bread. If you wanted to put tomato paste or tomato sauce, mustard, whatever your preferred family recipe is. I don't think my mom would allow me to call it meatloaf if it didn't have tomato soup on top of it. If I didn't put a dollop of yellow mustard, you know, those little containers that we all grew up on. My mom always put mustard in her meatloaf. I just like using seasonings, herbs, spices for the flavor of mine. And I apologize for the banging on my stovetop. Get this all nice and incorporated, those raw onions. Again, would typically be a larger batch, but because I'm going to be serving this in two options, the shepherd's pie and the meatloaf, we will have that. So the meatloaf is ready. I'm actually going to preheat the oven, and we will get that into a pan. So we're just going to get ready to start doing the cottage pie. I'm going to put half of my vegetables into a container because that's going to go with our meatloaf and mashed potatoes, but I need the other can for in the cottage pie. And the oven just told me it's ready, so I am going to put our meatloaf into the oven and let that cook while we do the cottage pie. So we're going to turn this on to medium, medium high. A little bit of avocado oil. And a spoon. So once that is warming up, then I will put in, okay, I've got a bunch of onions left over, so I think those onions are going to go into a baggie, and I will save those for another recipe. So, not using all of the ingredients we bought today, but I'll come toss them together tomorrow. And again, I like to fry up my onions first a little bit, get them softened before I put my meat. So I'm actually going to turn that up and crank it a little bit. Let that go. When you are making cottage pie, you can put Worcestershire sauce in. I always have it, so you can always use it. You don't have to. You could also add some beef oxo for a little bit of flavoring, things like that. Just depends on your personal preference and what your budget allows for. A lot of times you can get the Worcestershire sauce on sale. I think it was like $2.99 last week, and I swear this stuff lasts for like 6 months or more in my house. And I don't think it actually has an expiration date. I think my parents still have a container of it from when I was a child, if I'm being honest. It's just like the old containers of molasses they used to have in their house. We didn't move often, but there was always a container of molasses that came with us. But we're getting this fried up. The potatoes are cooking. I will check the potatoes once I toss the ground beef into here. It's going to be an onion-heavy cottage pie, but I personally don't find anything wrong with that. If you have one of these handy little devices, I just find it works better for the ground beef, but it's not essential. Again, you don't have to use as many onions. You don't have to use onions at all. It's just what I prefer. So I will run until that. I love the smell of onions cooking. One thing growing up we didn't have happening very often because unfortunately my dad is definitely allergic to onions, but when I get the opportunity I put onions in everything. Sorry, Dad. And if I was using frozen vegetables, I would be putting them in now. Unfortunately, the frozen vegetables were almost twice the price, yes, for double the amount. But again, I wanted to opt today for what I was going to use just for this meal. I know frozen veg doesn't go off, but if I was really stuck and I only had a $20 bill, when I go to the grocery store, that's always how I try to plan these meals. It's like whatever I have in the house plus the cash on hand. So I wasn't going to exceed that budget just for a larger supply of veg. But because they're canned peas and carrots, I don't want them to crumble. So I am going to wait until this is almost completely cooked. You can choose to strain your meat if you want to and drain all the excess liquid. If you bought extra lean or such like that, you wouldn't have that problem. But again, budget-wise, if you are really strapped, extra lean is a lot more expensive. And those potatoes are almost ready, so I will turn that down a little bit while I finish up the meat. But as I was saying, extra lean is a lot more expensive than regular or lean ground beef. This is lean, but as you can see, there is actually quite a bit of grease, so I am going to drain that off before I put my peas and carrots in. Grab my little pot here. Perfect. It's not completely dry because you don't want to get rid of all of that flavor, but it'll definitely help. Toss in our peas and carrots. And because I do have it, I'm going to put a little bit of Worcestershire sauce in. I'm going to turn this down. I'm going to put in half of my can of soup because I don't think I need the whole thing or it'll get too soupy. And again, the soup isn't mandatory, but you know, something you're accustomed to. Add cream of chicken. Add a beef consommé with a little bit of flour to it. Whatever works for your flavor profiles. It just helps everything bind together when you put it into the dish for your cottage pie. I'm not going to add any more salt into this, but I am going to add more pepper. If you wanted to put garlic or any of those things, you could do that as well, but I just like pepper. And now we're literally just doing this to heat it through. So the lower heat's fine while I drain my potatoes. And I'm going to have to scrub my stove. So I'm going to drain my potatoes here. So whatever method of mashing your potatoes works better for you. If you wanted to use a hand mixer, if you wanted to, don't use a blender. Please don't use a blender or a food processor. It just makes it very, very mushy. Use margarine, butter, whatever you have on hand to make it moist. If you have condensed or carnation milk, you could do that. I'm just going to use some margarine because that's what I have handy and in my fridge, and it's just to help bind it. I do like typically using my beaters to make a whipped mashed potato, but not everyone has one. It's not absolutely essential that you use it. I'm not making a mess of my stovetop again. So those are done. I'm just going to mix them up. So that you can see, not sure if you can see on here, but they are starting to stick together with that margarine that I put in. And again, if you wanted to make whipped potatoes, you can use your mixer. And I'm going to add a little bit of skim milk because I do not have canned milk. And again, it's just to get it to bind. Because these videos I try to just show you what you can do with the simplest of ingredients, the simplest of utensils. So we have mashed potatoes that are ready to go, either just mashed potatoes on the side with my meatloaf, or mashed potatoes on the top of our cottage pie. So we will assemble, and then we're going to end up doing 2 cottage pies. Get that margarine container out of the way. And the dog is at my feet, wondering if I'm going to spill anything on the floor for him, because that's what he does. When I prepare meals for clients, I prepare it in a certified kitchen. This is for myself, for my freezer stock. So he can be in the kitchen helping me, praying for things to be falling on the floor. And before I put that on there, I am going to get a bowl for my mashed potatoes, so I only put half. So that'll be the mashed potatoes I serve with the meatloaf. Put those with the vegetables I set aside earlier. And now just like that. So if I was going to cook these right now and serve them, I would toss them in the oven, let them cook. Everything is actually fully cooked, it's just to let the flavors incorporate. But because these are actually going to go in the freezer, I'm going to let them sit, following the food safe rules and getting them cooled down, put them in the freezer, and I'll eat them later. But I will show you, once the meatloaf is out, what these will look like as part of my freezer stock up. And again, $15, and I have 4 servings. You could do this for your family. So the meatloaf has come out of the oven. I have dished it up into 2 containers. This one I will have for my lunch tomorrow. This I'll put in the freezer. And I also have the 2 cottage pies that I made. I have labeled or prepared labels for it with the date on it so I know when they're ready, or best before. I also have half a can of the mushroom soup left, so I'll probably have that for lunch tomorrow. And I have a bunch of onions, toss it with an egg or 2, and maybe have an omelet in the morning. So $14.68 plus a little bit of breadcrumbs and an egg. And we were able to make 2 cottage pies and 2 servings of meatloaf. I did cook the meatloaf to 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 74 degrees Celsius. You always want to make sure that your meat is cooked. But $14.68 for meal for 4, whether you wanted to do it all meatloaf or you wanted to do it all cottage pie, or as I did, a little bit of both. I hope you enjoy and follow along for more tips and tricks.